The morning sun was just starting to warm the window pane over my kitchen sink. I was on my second cup of coffee, the kind of strong black brew that's built for real work, not these fancy little cups my son-in-law Wayne seems to prefer. My hands, rough and mapped with 68 years of Montana ranch life, wrapped around the mug like they were holding onto a fence post in a high wind. That's when Wayne walked in. He always looked out of place here, like a peacock in a cattle pen. 42 years old, suit crisp enough to cut yourself on, smelling of some city cologne that made my nose itch. He didn't even say good morning proper. Just set his briefcase on my clean table, a thing that already set my teeth on edge, and pulled out a stack of paper thicker than my old Bible. "Just a standard property transfer, Clint," he said, his voice all smooth, like he was selling something. He slid the document toward me. A pen followed. "Sign here, here, and initial there. It's for Maggie's security, for your daughter's future, for Maggie." He always used her name like a key, thinking it would unlock any door with me, and part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this man my girl loved had her best interests at heart. I picked up the pen, my calloused fingers feeling clumsy around its sleek shape. My eyes started to move over the first page, but it was a wall of words, dense legalese that swam and twisted like bad weather on the horizon. Parties of the first part, herein before mentioned, pursuant to... My gut, the one that's told me when a storm was coming long before the sky darkened, began to tighten. This wasn't simple. Nothing with Wayne ever was. Instead of starting at the beginning, I did what I always do when checking a fence. I went straight to the end to see where it was anchored. I flipped to the last signature page, and that's when I saw it. My thumb, stained with old dirt no amount of scrubbing ever gets out, ran down the margin. And it stopped. Cold. Paragraph 8.4. It was buried, tiny, a snake in the grass. The words were small, but they screamed at me. In perpetuity, sole and irrevocable power of attorney, all assets, real property, and financial instruments. It wasn't a transfer to secure Maggie. It was a theft, a legal, polished, smiling theft of everything I'd spent my life building, everything I'd intended for her, not for him. My head came up slowly. The coffee in my stomach turned to ice. I looked from the poisonous words on the page to Wayne's face. He was smiling, a smug, thin little curve of his lips. He thought he had me. He thought the old rancher was too simple, too trusting, to find the trap. That smile was the last straw. A red haze, hotter than any branding iron, flashed behind my eyes. I wasn't thinking about being polite. I wasn't thinking about Maggie in that moment. I was thinking about wolves in sheep's clothing. My hands, these old, rough hands, took hold of the thick contract, and with a sudden, violent motion that came from a lifetime of breaking tough colts and pulling stubborn calves, I ripped the entire document in two. The sound of tearing paper was the loudest, most satisfying sound I'd heard in years. The two halves fluttered onto the table between us, a silent, final declaration of war. Wayne's smug smile vanished, replaced by pure, unvarnished shock. I just stared back, my breath coming hard. The game was on. The Montana air was crisp and clean, the way it always is in early fall, but it felt heavy today. I was mending a section of fence line when I saw Maggie's sedan kicking up dust on the long driveway. My heart did that little jump it always does when I see my girl, but it settled quick. Something was off. She got out and I could see the strain around her eyes before she even smiled. It wasn't the tired from the drive kind of strain. It was the kind that sits in your soul. "Hey, Dad," she said, giving me a hug that felt a little too tight, like she was holding on for balance. We sat on the porch with sweet tea. For a while we just talked about nothing, the price of feed, the neighbor's new bull. But the quiet between us grew loud. Finally, she set her glass down, the ice cubes clinking like a warning bell. "It's Wayne," she started, twisting her wedding ring. "He's been talking about our future. Security, you know." I knew. I'd never trusted Wayne, not from the first time I met him at their wedding in Billings. He had a handshake that was all grip and no warmth, a lawyer's smile that didn't reach his eyes. Everything was a transaction. He thinks, well, we think, it would be smart to consolidate some assets. She couldn't look at me, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "The parcel you always said would be mine. The South 40 with the creek. He's drawn up some papers. Just a formality, he says. To secure it for our family's future." A coldness crept into my gut, right alongside the dread. This land wasn't an asset. It was where Maggie learned to ride, where her mother and I picnicked. It was a promise, not a line on a ledger. "Maggie, honey," I said, keeping my voice soft, "you know that land is yours. It's been yours in my heart since the day you were born. We don't need a paper from Billings for that." "I know, Dad, I do." Her voice was pleading. "But it would mean so much to him. It would show we're a team. He's just trying to take care of us." Seeing her caught in the middle, trying to please a husband whose world I didn't understand, that was the worst of it. My wariness of Wayne was a solid, immovable rock in my chest. But my love for Maggie was the river that could wear anything down. I let out a long sigh, the sound lost in the vast sky. I couldn't fight her on this, not when she was looking at me with her mother's eyes, full of quiet desperation. "All right," I said, the word tasting bitter. "I'm not promising anything, you hear? But I'll look at his papers, that's all. I'll look." The relief that washed over her face broke my heart a little. She hugged me again, whispering a thank you, and for a moment she was my little girl. But as I watched her car disappear down the drive, all I could think about was that lawyer's smile and the kind of small print a man like Wayne would hide in a promise. The knock at the door was too cheerful. 3 sharp raps. I knew it was him before I even looked through the peephole and saw Wayne's polished, smiling face. "Clint! Good to see you, my friend," he boomed as I opened the door, stepping inside like he owned the place. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Brought the sunshine with me, I see." It was overcast. I just nodded, my eyes dropping to the sleek leather folder tucked under his arm. "Wayne, let's sit, he said, already moving toward my kitchen table. He didn't wait for an invitation. He laid the folder down with a soft thud, unzipping it like he was revealing a treasure. Inside was a single daunting stack of paper. The future, right here. All for our Maggie. He slid the document toward me, but his hand stayed on it, tapping the top page. "This is the one, Clint. This will lock it all down for her. No probate headaches, no greedy estate taxes down the line. It's the ultimate protection. A father's final gift." His words were smooth, practiced. He talked about irrevocable trusts and asset shields, but his eyes never left my face, watching for a reaction. When he finally lifted his hand, I pulled the stack toward me. The print was small, dense. "It's a lot of pages," I said, my finger tracing a random paragraph. "Boilerplate," he announced with a wave of his hand. "All standard legal language. The important parts are right here." He leaned over, his cologne too strong, and flipped to the very last page. He pointed to 2 blank lines at the bottom. "Your signature and a witness. That's the magic. Everything else is just lawyer jargon." I started reading the first page, the words swimming a little. I've always read slowly, have to take my time. I felt the weight of his stare. "You know," I said, not looking up, "I'd like to keep this overnight. Give it a proper read." The silence that followed was sudden and cold. I glanced up. Wayne's smile was still there, but it was fixed now, tight at the corners. "The sooner the better, Clint, for Maggie's sake. These opportunities, they have a window." The pressure settled in the room like a fog. He was no longer just a friend offering help. He was a man in a hurry, and that made every single one of these dozens of pages feel like a trap. My throat went dry. This was for Maggie. But something in his insistence, in the way he glossed over everything but that signature line, made my skin prickle. This wasn't about protection. This was about a signature, and I wasn't ready to give it. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the kitchen. Outside, the world was black, but under the cold white eye of the lone lamp over the table, I was drowning in words. Wayne's contract was spread out before me, the pages feeling slick and heavy. My old battered dictionary, its spine cracked from years of quiet service, lay open beside it like a trusted friend. But even my friend was struggling tonight. My finger traced the lines of dense, tiny print, each sentence a thicket of thorns. "Encumbrance," I whispered, the word foreign on my tongue. I fumbled through the dictionary. A burden or impediment. My heart sank a little. Joint tenancy. Ownership shared with rights of survivorship. That one sounded almost okay, but the legal phrasing made my head ache. Reversionary interest. I couldn't even find it. The definitions I did find swam before my eyes, blurring into a gray soup of legalese designed to confuse men like me. Then I found it. Paragraph 8.4. My reading slowed, each word a deliberate step into a dark room. It talked about marital dissolution, about separation. My pulse, which had been a steady drum, began to quicken. It stated that in such an event, the property, Maggie's home, the land her mother loved, would transfer solely to Wayne. Maggie would forfeit all claim. Not a share, not a buyout. Everything. It wasn't a shield to protect my daughter. It was a snare, a trap door built right into the foundation of her future. This clause wasn't about bad luck or divorce. It was a guarantee. It was Wayne's back door, his signed and notarized theft. He wasn't just marrying her. He was laying claim to her birthright, with a clause that would activate at the first sign of trouble, leaving her with nothing. The rage didn't flood me. It detonated, a silent, white-hot explosion that started in my chest and shot down to my fingertips. The paper in my hands began to tremble, a faint, furious rustle in the silent kitchen. I stared at Wayne's neat signature at the bottom, now seeing it for what it was, not a promise, but a predator's mark. He'd tried to dress his greed in pretty paper, but under this bare bulb, I saw the poison for exactly what it was. The drive into Bozeman the next morning felt longer than usual. The mountains in the rear view just looked like a wall I'd left behind, and the whole valley ahead felt too quiet. I had the folder on the passenger seat, and that single paragraph, 8.4, felt like it was giving off a heat I could feel through the leather. I wasn't going to the bank. Not yet. I needed a fact. Something solid I couldn't argue with. I parked outside the county clerk's office, a place I hadn't set foot in for years. But I remembered Darla. We'd gone to high school together, and her family had a small spread near ours before they sold up. She'd know paper, and she'd tell me straight. The cool, quiet air of the records room was a shock after the morning sun. Darla was at the counter, and her smile when she saw me was genuine, touched with a little surprise. "Clint Walker, rancher's hours must be getting easier." "Wish they were," I said, managing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I got right to it, sliding the folder across the polished wood. "Need a professional opinion, Darla, as a friend. What do you make of this?" I pointed to the clause. I didn't mention Wayne's name. This wasn't about him yet. It was about the words on the page. She put on her reading glasses, her smile fading into a look of focused concentration. I watched her eyes move back and forth, then stop. She read it again. A small, sharp sigh escaped her nose. She looked up at me, then back down at the paper, tapping it with her fingernail. "Where'd you get this, Clint?" "It's in Maggie's trust." Darla took her glasses off slowly. Her expression was all the confirmation I needed before she even spoke. It was a mix of pity and anger. "This is what we call a reversionary rider. Nasty bit of business. You don't see them often outside of, well, certain kinds of family disputes. It's aggressively one-sided." My throat felt tight. "What's it do?" "On the surface, it says if the beneficiary, that's Maggie, is deemed to be acting against the interests of the trust's purpose, her rights revert. Sounds almost reasonable, right? Protection?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "But the language here, Clint. Sole discretion of the trustee. Any perceived detriment. There's no objective standard. It's a trap door. One person decides when it opens." She pushed the folder back toward me, her gaze steady and serious. "This isn't about protecting your daughter, Clint. This is about cutting her out." The quiet certainty in her voice landed in my gut like a stone. My suspicion, that low, simmering dread I'd carried since I first read it, didn't just harden. It froze solid. This was no oversight, no clumsy legal phrasing. This was the blueprint. And now I had to figure out exactly what Wayne was planning to build with it. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, Maggie's picture flashing on the screen. A wave of warmth hit me. My daughter never called during her workday. "Hey, sweetheart, what's—" The sound that came through the receiver wasn't her usual bright laugh. It was a choked, wet sob. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. "Maggie? Honey, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" "Dad," she managed, her voice trembling. "It's Wayne. He's so upset." I leaned against the counter, the cold granite biting into my palms. "Upset about what?" "Talk to me." "About the trust. About paragraph 8.4. She took a shaky breath. "He said you're being stubborn, that you're being selfish, and you're jeopardizing our entire financial planning for the future. He said if you really loved me, you'd just sign the amendment and stop causing problems." Each word was a physical blow. I could see Wayne's tactic as clearly as if he'd drawn me a diagram. He wasn't in the room with me, arguing about fiduciary duty or asset allocation. He was in her ear, using her love for me as a crowbar. He'd turned my caution into a personal betrayal against my own child. The silence, on my end, must have scared her. "Dad, please. I don't want there to be this fight. He's my husband. I just want peace." There it was. The crisis, laid bare in my quiet kitchen. My little girl was crying, and the man who was supposed to cherish her was weaponizing her tears to get to my signature. I had two paths, both mined. I could lay it all out. I could say, "Maggie, he's not planning for your future, he's planning for his." Paragraph 8.4, the deception clause, lets him move assets without your knowledge or consent. He's using you to pressure me. But doing that would be lighting a fuse under her marriage. It would force her to choose between her father's word and her husband's. It could break her world. The other path? Stay silent. Sign the paper. Let the robbery happen just to dry her tears today. But that wouldn't protect her. It would just make me an accomplice. "Maggie," I said, my voice softer than I felt, "listen to me. I love you more than anything in this world. You know that, right?" "I know," she whispered. "My job, my only job, is to protect you. That's all this is. It's not stubbornness. It's not me being difficult. If something seems too good to be true, or if someone pressures you this hard to sign something you don't fully understand, that's a red flag. That's all I'm asking for. Time to understand." I heard her quiet crying subside into sniffs. I hadn't named Wayne the villain. I hadn't exposed the clause. But I had planted a seed of doubt. Not in her husband, but in the situation. It was a razor's edge. Expose him now, and I might lose her. Stay completely silent, and I'd lose her anyway, just more slowly. "Just think about it, okay?" I said. "No more tears, please, for your old dad." She gave a weak, watery laugh. Okay, Dad. I love you." "I love you too, kiddo." I hung up, the phone feeling like a lead weight in my hand. The crisis wasn't over. It had just begun. Wayne had shown his hand. He'd brought my daughter into the fight, and now I had to figure out how to win it without breaking her heart. The phone felt heavy in my hand like a loaded gun. I took a deep breath, the smell of old leather and dust from my study filling my lungs. I had to make this sound real. I dialed Wayne's number, my thumb rough against the buttons. It rang twice before that smooth, arrogant voice answered. "Clint, to what do I owe the pleasure?" I let my voice waver, putting on the rasp of a tired, beaten man. "Wayne, it's me. I've been thinking." "I'm listening," he said, and I could hear the greedy silence on the other end. "You were right," I said, squeezing my eyes shut to sell the lie. "I'm just a rancher. These lawyers, this legal stuff, all this talk about paragraph 8.4, that deception clause, it's over my head. It's all just words on a page to me." I let out a shaky sigh. "My Maggie. She's all that matters. For her, I'll sign. Let's just end it." I could almost feel his triumph radiating through the receiver. "Now you're seeing sense, old man." "Come out tomorrow," I said, keeping my tone flat and defeated. 10 a.m. We'll do the paperwork here, where it started. Then you get what you want, and you leave my family alone." "I'll be there," he said, and the line went dead. I placed the phone back in its cradle, my act dropping instantly. My jaw was set. He'd swallowed it whole. But the trap had two parts. I picked the phone back up and dialed the only number that ever made me smile. "Hi, Dad." Maggie's voice was sunshine. "Hey, sweetheart. Listen, can you come out to the ranch tomorrow, a little before 10? "Of course. Is everything okay?" she asked, concern creeping in. "Everything's going to be just fine," I said, and I meant it. "I've got a surprise for you. About the land. It's time you saw how some things get handled." She agreed. Her curiosity piqued. I hung up, my plan locked into place. Wayne thought he was walking into a surrender. Maggie thought she was coming for a revelation. But they were both walking into a confrontation, on my turf, on my terms. I walked to the window and looked out over my land, the rolling fields, the old oak by the fence line. This was where my wife and I had built our life. This was where Wayne had tried to steal our legacy through a loophole, through that damned deception clause. He thought he was dealing with a confused old man. He was about to learn he'd been talking to a rancher, and a rancher knows how to protect what's his. I turned from the window, my resolve as solid as the earth outside. Tomorrow, the game would be over. The air in the diner was thick with the smell of old coffee and bacon grease, but all I could smell was the storm coming. I sat across from Maggie, my hands wrapped tight around a cold mug. She was fiddling with a napkin, her brow furrowed. "Dad, what's this about?" Wayne said it was urgent, something about finalizing the partnership papers. "Just wait, honey," I said, my voice low. "You need to hear this from him." The bell over the door jangled, and there he was. Wayne strode in like he owned the place, a slick, confident smile plastered on his face, a leather folder tucked under his arm. He gave Maggie a quick peck on the cheek before sliding into the booth beside her. "Clint, good, you're here. Let's get this done. I've got the new contract, all the amendments we discussed." He laid the folder on the Formica table with a final thump. I didn't say a word. I just reached into the inside pocket of my old jacket and pulled out the original contract, the one he'd pressured me to sign months ago. I'd torn it clean in half the night I finally saw the truth. I laid the two pieces right on top of his fancy new document. Wayne's smile flickered. "What's this?" "Before I sign anything new, Wayne," I said, my voice steady as a plumb line, "explain this to your wife." I pointed a calloused, dirt-stained finger at a specific block of text, paragraph 8.4. "Explain how this standard clause gives you my daughter's birthright if you ever decide to leave her." The color drained from his face. "Clint, that's just legal boilerplate. Asset protection. Maggie understands." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry cough. "Honey, tell him." Maggie looked from him to the torn paper, her confusion deepening. "Wayne?" He started to bluff, his words tumbling over each other. "It's for the stability of the business. It's standard in any marital partnership agreement. It doesn't mean what he's implying." I didn't let him finish. I picked up the torn page, cleared my throat, and began to read paragraph 8.4 aloud. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, cutting through his nervous energy like a cold chisel. I read every legalese word that spelled it out. In the event of dissolution of the marriage, all shares and assets of the family farm held in Maggie's name from her mother would revert to Wayne as the managing partner. I watched my daughter's face as I spoke. I saw the moment the words clicked, the moment the legal jargon translated into a brutal, simple truth. The confusion in her eyes shattered, replaced by a dawning horror. Then a profound, gut-wrenching hurt. Her face crumbled, her hand flying to her mouth as if to hold in a sob. She wasn't looking at the contract anymore. She was staring at the man she'd married, seeing a stranger. Wayne was still stammering, reaching for her hand. "Maggie, sweetheart, let me explain." But the silence from her side of the table was louder than any shout. The contract, his lies, my deception. It was all out in the open now, sitting right there between us with the coffee stains and the sugar packets. The real battle was just beginning. The silence in the ranch house kitchen was thicker than the dust on a forgotten saddle. I just stood there, the copy of paragraph 8.4, the deception clause, held between my fingers like a winning poker hand I never wanted to play. Wayne's face, usually so smooth and confident, was doing a strange dance between panic and rage. "This is insane, Clint," he blustered, his voice too loud for the quiet room. He took a step toward me, but I didn't budge. "You've always been paranoid, seeing conspiracies in every handshake. I was trying to help you streamline things." I didn't say a word. I just looked past him, to Maggie, my daughter. She was staring at her husband, but not with the love or trust I was used to seeing. Her eyes were wide, glassy with the shock of a deep, cold hurt. "Help me?" I finally said, my voice calm. It was a calm that came from the other side of a long, ugly fight. "By hiding a clause that would have let you sell my water rights out from under me? By letting me sign a contract that would have made me a tenant on my own land, Wayne? That's your help?" He spluttered, searching for a lie, but the truth was right there in black and white. His facade, the good son-in-law act he'd maintained for years, cracked right down the middle. You could see the calculation in his eyes vanish, replaced by the naked anger of a man who'd been caught. That's when Maggie moved. She walked over to me, took the single page from my hand and read it, really read it. I saw her shoulders slump, then tighten. She turned back to Wayne, and the heartbreak on her face was almost too much to bear. "All those talks about the future, about modernizing," her voice trembled, but it didn't break. "You were just drawing him a map to steal from him. From us." "Maggie, sweetheart, you don't understand the legalities," he tried, reaching for her. "Don't." The word was a whip crack. The fury in her eyes now burned away the tears. "I understand enough. I understand you lied to me. You used me to get to my father. Get out." It was like all the air left his body. "You don't mean that. This is your home." "It's my father's home," she said, her voice steel. "And you are no longer welcome in it. Leave. Now." He looked from her to me, his plot not just exposed but incinerated in the quiet fire of her betrayal. His credibility, his standing, the entire house of cards he'd built, it was all gone. With one last venomous look at me, he turned and walked out. We didn't hear his truck start. We just stood there, listening to the silence he left behind. Maggie walked to the wood stove, opened the iron door, and without a word, fed the original stolen contract into the flames. We watched it curl and blacken, becoming nothing but fragile, weightless ashes. The threat was gone. The villain was defeated. And in the quiet, just me and my girl, the ranch felt like ours again for the first time in years. The sun was dipping behind the Montana hills, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. The kind of sunset this land gives you as a gift for putting up with its harsh winters. I took a slow sip of my coffee, the ceramic mug warm in my hands. A week. It only took a week for the dust to settle, but it felt like a lifetime had passed since we faced down Wayne. I looked over at Maggie, sitting in the rocking chair beside me on the porch of the ranch house. She was quiet, just watching the light fade over the pastures that were hers again. Truly hers. The deed wasn't just in her name anymore. It was locked up in a trust with more protections than a bank vault. She'd picked every single one of those ironclad clauses herself. No more hidden paragraphs, no more deception clauses lying in wait like a snake in the grass. Paragraph 8.4 was just a bad memory now. "It's quiet," Maggie said, her voice soft, almost part of the evening breeze. "It is," I agreed. And it was. It wasn't just the absence of Wayne's slick, threatening presence. It was a deeper quiet. The quiet of a fight that's finished, and finished right. The land felt secure. The fences were mended, the gates were strong, and the title was clear. I'd spent my whole life protecting this patch of earth, from weather, from rustlers, from my own doubts, but protecting it for her, from someone who wanted to steal its very soul. That was a different kind of battle. I let my gaze travel over the rolling hills, the darkening outlines of the pines, the silhouette of the old barn against the colored sky. Every ridge, every creek bed held a story. Most of them were mine. Now, the newest chapter was hers. A good chapter, a peaceful one. The villain was gone. Not just from the property, but from our future. His shadow had lifted, and what was left was just this: the land, the sunset, and my daughter. Safe. I took another sip of coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. It was more than the coffee. It was the certainty. I was at peace. Not because the work was done, the work on a ranch is never done, but because the most important job was. I protected my family. The rest was just scenery, and tonight the scenery was perfect. Maggie reached over and put her hand on my arm, giving it a gentle squeeze. She didn't need to say anything. We just sat there, in the growing twilight, watching our world settle into the calm of night. It was over, and it was enough.